Well, it's the morning after the day before. Yesterday was the AAA exam, and I hope you found it okay. I've had lots of feedback from my students about what came up on the exam paper, and that's the basis of this summary I'm recording now. Now, the caveat is that I haven't seen any of the exam paper, so I don't really know what came up. This is a summary of what I've been told by others, but I'm obviously trying to corroborate as much as I can from various sources so I can give you an accurate reflection of what came up on the paper. Now, I thought I'd start by giving myself a bit of a grading. Now, if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll have seen that I gave 3 tips for March, 3 tips of things that I thought would come up in the exam. The first one, I was tipping business risks because it came up heavily in December and it didn't come up. But my second tip was on quality management. I tipped this one heavily, saying that quality management is something the examiner has been testing a lot recently and has been talking about being of particular importance, and it did come up heavily. And I also went out on a bit of a limb because fraud hasn't come up for a while, and I tipped it to come up this time, and ding, it did come up. So I'm grading myself 66%, a clear, comfortable pass, although not perfect. Right, I thought I'd do a little bit of analysis of around the tech issues on exam day, because in December, well, it was a bit of a car crash for some people. The remote invigilation just didn't work for a lot of people. And my summary of the exam tech for the March 23 sitting is a dramatic improvement, getting better. Right, we didn't have any of these widespread problems where lots of people were struggling to log on to the exam system as they were in December. So ACCA, big tick. They told me that they'd put in place significant improvements, and the evidence of this sitting is yes, those improvements have really worked. However, it wasn't perfect. There were isolated incidents of people, both remote invigilation and sitting exams in exam centre where the system froze or they got booted out, and they had to log out and log back in again. And some people lost 15, 20 minutes across the exam through doing this. One of my students had to log in and out 5 times across the entire exam paper. Now, if that's you, if you did have exam system issues on the day, then my advice is to apply to ACCA for mitigating circumstances, because they will take it into account if you are a marginal student. Now, what came up in the exam? Well, on screen, you can see the 2 variants of the exam that came up in Section A. If you'd like to read them in detail, pause the recording here. Now, my analysis of these 2 variants in Section A. Well, firstly, I was surprised there was no business risk. Yeah, we had business risk came up a lot in December, didn't come up at all this time. So, I mean, what can we take out of that? Well, both in December and March, the examiner had the same structure for Section A. Both questions in December had business risks. Both questions in March had audit risks, but no business risks. So perhaps they're trying to be consistent. Now, in both of these variants, the reporting from my students is they found it hard to get enough risks out of the scenario. And this seems to be the examiner's latest style. They don't give you loads and loads of audit risks to go after. They give you just enough. So there might have been 5 or 6 audit risks that you could have gone at in the scenario, but not absolutely loads of them. And this is something I think actually chimes with one of the examiner's comments from recently, that they don't want students to try and write 12 risks for a 24-mark question and just to write a list of it in each one. They don't want that. What they do want is you to take the risks that are in the scenario, the significant ones, and to really run with them and develop them fully. There was a bit of a twist. In one of these variants, the gaming one, you were told to calculate materiality based on revenue. And, well, is it a twist or a surprise? Well, the examiner did exactly the same thing in December. So perhaps it's not so much of a twist. Non-audit services featured in both variants. Internal audit in one of them, and helping the company to develop some data analytics software in the other one. And in the Allure, the international restaurant chain, we were given segmental analysis, which is something we've seen several times in the past. Now, my analysis of these Section A questions, from what I've been told, is that if you'd prepared by practicing a wide range of previous exam questions, you would have been very comfortable in attempting both or either of these questions. Into Section B. Now, as always in AAA, there's one Section B question that focuses mainly on reporting and one that focuses on other stuff. And in the reporting question, well, if you pause and have a look at the analysis on screen there, hopefully you'll see something coming up again and again and again. There was loads of quality management. It was in everyone's question in Section B. And actually, some people got it in the first Section B question and in the second Section B question as well. It was really, really heavily tested. So quite pleased and slightly smug that I tipped this to come up heavily. There wasn't any of those horrible questions where you were asked to critically evaluate an audit report. And I think a lot of students would have been pleased with that. It's something that people generally struggle with. There was, in at least one of these variants, a real focus on materiality, where you were reviewing the audit work that had been done, but the materiality level had been set at a strange level. Instead of our standard 5 to 10% of PBT, it had been done at 20% of PBT. And we had to comment on that and the issues around it. So a bit of a twist there. Rather than in the old world of AAA, there were loads of marks for just calculating materiality. In this new world, they expect you to understand it in greater depth and therefore be able to comment on the implication of if you've done it in a different way to standard. So that's the examiner there trying to test a higher level of understanding, I think, rather than just, can you do this calculation? There was some communicating to those charged with governance, and that's slightly unusual. That doesn't always come up. And I think a well-prepared student would have practiced some questions that would have included that. But if you were only focusing on the core topics, you may have found that would be a difficult requirement for you. Now, the other question, the second Section B question, and as I said, one of these did include some quality management around the final analytical procedures. Now, unusually, and I haven't seen this for a while, there was actually a question that focused on the UK parts of the syllabus. That was the third variant that involved fraudulent trading, which is something that's around there. That's a UK-specific topic. Now, I have had a couple of my international students saying that came up in their variant as well. So something a little bit strange going on there. But there was a UK variant and it did focus on fraud. So I was quite pleased to see that fraud came up as I tipped it. The examiner did focus on some core topics that they often examine. Acceptance is something that's been tested a lot recently. The examiner seems to really like it. And they also seem to really like forecasts, getting you to critically evaluate a cash flow forecast. That came up in a couple of different variants across the two Section B questions. And there was a real focus on analytical procedures, both actually in Section A, where in one of the variants you had to use analytical procedures to support your audit risks. And here in Section B, students were given the results of final analytical procedures in a little table and asked to comment on them. Now, the comment I got from my students who got that variant is, first of all, it threw them. They hadn't seen a question like that before. But the second comment they said was, actually, once I got over the initial shock and I broke the question down and I remembered my exam technique and I remembered all of the advice that I'd been given, actually that question was fine. And that comment made me feel really pleased and really proud. Something I really tried to focus on in my course is if you are hit with something difficult, that's supposed to be hard. You're supposed to find it difficult. Your job is to look for the easy marks, and there will be some. And I was really pleased that my students gave me that comment, that they found it hard to start with, but they remembered that advice. Well, thanks for watching this review video. I hope you found it useful. And if you want support with AAA for the next exam sitting, scan the QR code and get in touch.